Susan had taken the other canoe and gone berry picking either on shore or the other end of the island, had come back later after the bear had fed or before. But after the attack and the bear had surprised her, no. Seen her coming and gone to meet her and then chased her back to the canoe and out in the water. There were bear tracks in the soft mud of the bank, off to the south side, that he had missed before when he first arrived, and they went for a considerable distance out of sight. So, the bear had attacked, maybe fed on land, but had still been around, perhaps rummaging further in the cabin when Suzanne returned from berry picking. Perhaps she called, sensing something was wrong, and the bear had heard her and gone after her. But she was so close to the canoes and had gotten back in and out of the water, into apparently deep enough water, before the bear could get her. Fast. She had been fast. The bear had cut the corner and not run the trail, which explained why Brian hadn't seen his tracks coming up when he first arrived. And she still beat him. God, he thought. She must have been terrified. Worse, far worse. She had no idea about her parents. But why hadn't she come back? It had been 2-3 days, judging by the fly eggs and worms, and she still wasn't there. And where were the smaller ones? Brian hadn't seen any of their tracks, nor he swallowed uneasily, and had other signs that they had been nearby when the bear attacked. Had the bear gotten Susan and the children, taking them somewhere else? Come on, he said to the dog, stay with me. He moved at a trot down the shoreline of the island. The trot now slightly in the lead, heading south, and the bear tracks lined out in front of him along the bank, through the willows and hazel brush, but always close to the shoreline. Now and then the tracks lunge at the water, then back. God, he was playing with Susan. She was working the canoe along the shore, trying to get away from the bear and get back to camp from the other side. And the bear was playing with her, teasing her, jumping toward her whenever she came too close to shore. Although the island, all around the island, and then off, as she must have hand-paddled toward the main shore, and when Brian waded across the shallow water, he saw where the bear had followed her down the main shoreline as well. But then after 100 yards or so, the bear had tired of the game and stopped and moved back in the direction of the island, but up into the trees and harder ground and tight grass, and Brian lost his trail there. All right, then why didn't she come back to the island? Or a better question was, why did the bear stop following her along the shore? Brian came up with 2 reasons. First, she had moved away from the shore, out into the lake, and with only her hands to paddle, she could not move the canoe well. If a wind came up, even a small wind, it would blow her where it wanted, and if she was lucky, it would blow her out into the lake, away from the bear. If she had been unlucky and the wind blew the canoe into shore, he shook the thought off. The second reason she might have stayed away from the island was that it became dark. Paddling by hand, splashing and clawing, trying to move possibly against the wind, and marking all the noise in the world, there was no way she could bring herself to approach the island in the dark with the bear, probably waiting for her. No way. So she worked her way into the deep part of the lake, or more probably the wind took her, the prevailing north wind, and blew her all night to the south end of the lake, into the large marsh and willows and swamps Brian had come through. He might have passed not too far from her on his way north, where she might have blown to shore on the east side. And there she might be, without a paddle. She could never get the canoe back north. It would be suicide to try to work by foot along the bank with no weapon. He stopped, looking at the shoreline and the dog. Her whimpering had stopped, and her hair was down. The bear was nowhere near. He would have to go back, get his canoe, find Susan. She had to be somewhere south on the lake, trying to work north, trying to get back. He started jogging back, the dog keeping close to his side. Evening was coming, and part of him knew that he should bury Anne and David, but he knew it would have to wait. They had to find Susan, find out what happened to the children, before the bear. They found her just before dawn. He and the dog had been walking the shoreline, scanning the edge of the water and peering out toward the center of the lake, as they kept a wary eye on the edge of the woods. She was 4 miles down the lake on the east shore, dragging the canoe along the shallows on the lake edge, so she could jump in and push out if she saw the bear. He saw Susan long before she saw him, because she was watching the dog, and saw when she lifted her nose, catching the scent of something, someone familiar and loved. Susan was intent on watching the thick foliage on the shoreline. When she was just 100 yards away, he called, "Susan!" And it startled her so that she jumped into the canoe as if to hide. And when he got closer, he saw that she was half crazed with fear and exhaustion. And he understood. He had felt the fear himself, and she probably hadn't slept in 2 or 3 days or nights. "It's me, Brian. You don't know me, but I spent some time with your family." He pulled up alongside her canoe and held the two together. "Bear," she said. Her hair was matted, and there were scratches on her face and arms. She had been in the water so long she couldn't speak without her teeth chattering. "Bear." I know. Here, wrap in this, go to sleep. I'll pull you back." Brian took his sleeping bag and reached across into her canoe and wrapped her in it and forced her to lie down on the bottom while he tied a line to her bow, fed it back, and started paddling, pulling the canoe in behind her. The dog jumped into the first canoe, settling near Susan, who didn't notice her presence through the crushing exhaustion that overtook her as soon as she sat down. It was in the dark by this time, and there was a stout evening north and a chop. North wind and a chop. It would take 5 or 6 hours to pull the two canoes against the wind back to the island. Good. She needed a rest. She did not know about her parents yet, or had only guessed. And when she found out, it would be terrible for her. Any rest she could get now would be a godsend.